Hello and welcome to OtakuDaiKun. I'm Dai, and today we'll be covering more lore from Nikke Goddess of Victory. This series is designed for both veterans and newcomers, where I blaze through the main story and Dai-chan dives into analysis and spoilers at the end of each video. Our mission this time is a big one. While the commander is in free fall from the previous video, some insanely important developments have been occurring around Eden. As such, it's time to cover both the side story, Eden's Spear, and its sequel, the Goddess Fall event. It unites a handful of loose ends into one common goal, really escalating the central conflict of this entire game. From atop Mother Whale, we witnessed the firing of Eden's Spear, a massive beam of energy fired into the sky. Our first order of business is learning what led up to that blast, and why. The main issue is that Eden hasn't been responding to any of the commander's messages. Understandably, they've been busy as hell. Let's go back to when Dorothy left for the Ark. It seems she did that without telling the others at Eden, and ever since, she's been ghosting them. The only bit of info Eden had to go on was detecting the massive hole in the Ark. They chose not to take action regarding the Ark's invasion. Papillon was obviously worried about her home, but was still technically Eden's hostage and couldn't persuade anyone to check it out. Instead, Eden would finally receive a message from Dorothy, specifying coordinates to where the commander left Nihilister's dying body. Recall how back then, she wanted us to finish her off, but the commander instead covered her in a camouflaged tarp. Using an Atlas cage, Eden went out there and captured Nihilister, only for Cecil to confirm the heretic had been rendered completely inactive. Her core output was dangerously low, preventing her nanomachines from repairing her body. If left alone, she would certainly die. After various attempts to jumpstart Nihilister's core, Cecil insisted on consulting an expert. This expert wound up being the pilgrim Nayuta. The commander just met her, but Nayuta has already admitted to being a former member of Deep, which, as we know, once held the key to humanity's most ancient hidden technology. Even though Nayuta's supposed to be riding atop Whaley, she's able to visit Eden at Cecil's request. This is because Nayuta has some very unique powers as a Nikke. The Nayuta we saw get killed up there was actually just one of many copies she spread across the surface. When one of these clones dies, it disintegrates into particles of light that return to the main body. By using these clones to corroborate information, Nayuta has been able to gather knowledge nobody else has. Even though Johan knew about this, he was reluctant to request her aid, and instead treated her rudely upon arrival. To be fair, Johan's always kind of an asshole. In truth, he was afraid, not even knowing which version of Nayuta this was. Nonetheless, he led her inside Eden to help bring Nihilister back to life. Why? Interrogation, of course. Before getting her ass kicked, Nihilister was saying some weird shit about Lilith's body being able to kill the queen. Again, Lilith was another name for Lilyweiss, the first and strongest Nikke ever developed. How could her deceased corpse pose a threat to the queen? Johan and Cecil wanted to know more about this before letting Nihilister die on them. Nayuta humbly suggested feeding Nihilister rapture parts by mouth, as she'd seen a heretic feeding in such a way on the surface, even though it cost the life of one of her copies. Makes you wonder just how many lives she has. Anyway, this method actually worked, and Nihilister's core began to regenerate, albeit slowly. Meanwhile, Papillon was bored out of her skull, unable to freely roam Eden or even open the refrigerator without permission. Much to her surprise then, her phone started getting texts from Dorothy. Behind Eden's back, she wanted to leak their technology to the Ark via a private connection from her tablet. As it benefited both parties, Dorothy instructed Papillon to serve as a middleman, ensuring her own squad mates from Inherit wouldn't catch on. Hilariously though, they figured things out on their own, and only hoped Dorothy's quest for revenge against the Ark wouldn't cause Eden any trouble. Thus, they let Papillon go on thinking she was acting in secret. When Nihilister regained consciousness, she didn't want to cooperate, but the threat of being tortured had her changing tactics. Both she and Eden were aware that the Rapture Queen had been floating around Earth's orbit for a while now. Johann wanted to confirm the Queen's exact coordinates, but could never find them due to visual interference from some kind of liquid metal in the atmosphere. By this point, we already know this barrier is Siren's bubble veil. She built it to keep the Queen from observing Earth, but it also prevented us from being able to see the Queen. Johann, understandably, knew nothing about this. Rather, he only knew that since the bubble veil went up, the Queen has been unable to communicate with her rapture children and heretics. If Cinderella's experience is anything to go by, heretics feel a strong compulsion to obey the Queen, a voice in their head issuing commands they can't refuse. By extension, heretics don't necessarily want to serve the Queen, which explains why someone like Nihilister would want to kill her. Before her link to the surface was cut off, the Queen had been asking her children to find and deliver Lilith's body. However, the heretics didn't take this seriously after the Queen's voice stopped. Liberalio was the only heretic who still pretended to hear the Queen's voice, while the other heretics realized they had free reign over the surface. Still, Nihilister figured Lilith's body had to be important, so she searched around and finally found it. Her plan was simple. Assuming the Queen functioned like one of the heretics, Nihilister planned to poison Lilith's body with Vaphaus, then feed it back to the Queen. To gain help carrying out this plan, Nihilister resurrected both Chatterbox and Indivilia. In hindsight, that didn't work out the way she had hoped. At this point, she wanted to strike a deal with Eden to make it happen. Rather than reveal the exact location of Lilith's body directly, though, she insisted they heal her enough so she could personally show them the way. Johann and Cecil agreed to these terms, especially since they still had a functioning Vaphaus bullet. Thus, Inherit Squad was ordered to gather high-quality Rapture parts, just enough so that Nihilister could walk, but not fight back. Perhaps Eden was a bit careless, however, because as soon as Nihilister stepped out of her Atlas cage, Liberalio began to sense her presence. Ever since the commander's first encounter with her, Liberalio had been targeting Eden, blanketing the area in continuous rainfall as a means of reconnaissance. Eden's optical camouflage had kept Liberalio away, but now their location was compromised. With a dangerous heretic at their doorstep, Johann ordered Cecil to fire off Eden's spear, even if it meant revealing his hand to Nayuta. The blast torched Liberalio and her army of raptures, seemingly incinerating them all. It appears the entire city of Eden powers this cannon, and even using it at 30% strength was enough to leave them vulnerable for a time. Believing Liberalio to be dead, Johann let Nihilister out of her cage once more, but this was premature. In truth, Liberalio survived the attack by shrinking her body. Now with Eden exposed, albeit briefly, she swiftly flew into the city and straight to where Cecil manned the cannon. She originally came looking for Nihilister, only to find something much more imperative. Basically, Liberalio wanted to use the cannon for herself. Cecil tried to fight back, but didn't really stand a chance. Before anyone else could reach her, Liberalio aimed Eden's spear up to the sky, launching that beam we saw in the previous chapter. Her target was the bubble veil, and that blast destroyed it. Thanks to her, the Queen can now stare down the entire planet. Having accomplished her goal, Liberalio left Eden to go find the commander on Mother Whale, bringing us to the present. As the Gene Reaper, she's busy trying to exterminate all other potential queens. With the Queen in space now set to descend to Earth, Johann wants to charge Eden's spear for another strike. Will he make it in time? Meanwhile, from the Crown Kingdom, Marian spots the same beam of light from before and immediately begins to feel the Queen's presence. She felt a sudden urge to leave the kingdom and protect the world, bidding farewell to Chime, Crown, Kilo, and Talos. Likewise, Siren could also feel the Queen's presence staring down from above. Her veil was the only thing keeping the Queen at bay, and now a confrontation is inevitable. This is where we transition from the Eden Spear side story into the Goddess Fall event. I'm not a fan of this title, as it happens to overlap with a previous incident in the timeline with the exact same name. Goddess Fall is supposed to refer to when a bunch of Nikkes tried to flee the Ark, only to sacrifice themselves to prevent their elevator from crashing. Now, it also refers to the Queen's descent upon Eden. Just bear that in mind going forward. As feared, the Rapture Queen descends from space, but leaves some distance from the surface. The folks at Eden want to fire their spear at maximum output, even if it destroys most of their facilities in the process. Unfortunately, the Queen acts first, launching her own barrage of energy down upon them. Eden sustains critical damage, but otherwise remains intact, so Johann orders everyone to focus on repairs. Outside, Nayuta tries to convince the Pioneer Squad to help out despite their irreconcilable differences. Seeing the Queen's red beam torch Eden helped establish urgency. After all, this may be the only chance they'll ever get to take down the Queen. Despite the damage, Eden's spear hasn't been fully compromised, but it does need time to fire. Hopefully the Queen won't follow up with another strong attack, though there's no guarantee she won't. In either case, the destruction has alerted hordes of raptures to Eden's location, and they need to be kept at bay. Thus, in exchange for food, booze, and supplies, Pioneer agrees to offer their aid. Nayuta deems she would be most useful taking Nihilister out to find Lilith's body. Johann reluctantly authorizes her side quest. In order for Nihilister to conceal herself from the other heretics, she wears a cloak fashioned from the Atlas Cage. She complains how Nayuta wants to traverse the land on the back of Mantra, a robotic camel. Hilariously, she underestimates that this is a very fast camel, dashing across the plains quicker than any steed. The other pilgrims pair up to take different posts defending Eden. Scarlet and Isabel cover one side. Our sword maiden partakes of drink before battle, proclaiming she wants to one day drink without a care in the world, as opposed to drinking to overcome her grief. Noah and Rapunzel pair up to protect Eden should the Queen fire another beam. Rapunzel asserts that a shield meant to protect someone special can block anything. It's a comforting sentiment, but Noah, immature as always, plans to prove herself superior. Snow White and Harran pair up begrudgingly, acknowledging their opposing goals. Snow hates how Eden plans to take revenge on humanity. After all this time, she's avoided the Ark when possible, believing they must have had a reason for exiling the goddesses. While she wants to find out why, she also refuses to burden the Ark and is patiently waiting for the day humanity reclaims the surface. Atop Mantra, Nihilister confesses that she wants to slay the Queen because she hates being looked down on. She's convinced she's stronger and refuses to bow her head to the Queen just because they were born differently. Their destination is a civilian camp outside the Ark. Nihilister buried Lilith's body under a pile of Nikkes who, like their goddess squad, were locked out of the Ark long ago. To keep raptures from scavenging their corpses, Nihilister removed their cores. It appears she has some compassion that stems from a past she'd rather forget. As Nihilister puts it, the Queen's brain was damaged at some point. I think it's safe to assume this resulted from her battle against Cinderella. Regardless, the Queen demanded a replacement, the brain of humanity's best Nikke, so Liberalio swiped Lilith's head and delivered it. Admittedly, I'm still not sure how this happened, given the entire point was that the Queen's space station got cut off from the lift. However, since Liberalio can fly, that seems to be the most plausible theory, though I'd like a confirmation at some point. Anyway, among the heretics, Liberalio was the most loyal, even after she could no longer hear her mother's voice. Before the veil was complete, the Queen also called out for Lilith's remaining body, but at that point, Liberalio could no longer find it. Nihilister, by chance, discovered Lilith's body frozen in a glacier up north. Given what we now know about the Overzone event, it's safe to say that Snow White, upon finding the headless body, chose to hide it in ice so it couldn't be defiled any further. Later, Nihilister found it and buried it under these dead Nikkes. It seems Nayuta didn't realize the Lilith in question is Lilyweiss. They must have shared a close bond, as the sight of Lily's remains brings Nayuta to tears. She insists on handling the body with care, but Nihilister has her own plan. As a contingency measure, in case Eden feels she's outlived her usefulness, Nihilister fuses Lilith's body with her own. That way, if anyone tries to kill her, they risk damaging the precious Nikke. Meanwhile, Crown, Chime, Talos, and Kilo of White Knight discuss Marian's absence and make preparations to find her. It seems that, rather than her friends in the kingdom, Marian has recruited the aid of Chatterbox and Indivilia. Sure enough, at the end of the Lost Kingdom event, Marian awakened to the queen gene inside of her. Back then, she ordered the two of them to back off, but this time, she's using her queen's influence to have them fight alongside her. So yeah, regardless of what the four beasts are planning, Marian is also a queen candidate, likely gaining that ability when she was made into a heretic. When asked about her vision for the future, Marian claims she wants to defeat the original queen and create a world where humans, Nikkes, heretics, and raptures can all love each other and get along. Hearing this makes Indivilia want to resist, but Marian intends on forcing her obedience. At this point, however, Marian is only a fledgling queen, and her influence pales in comparison to the original. Thus, when the OG queen cries out, Indivilia switches allegiance, slicing into Marian's eyes before cutting her up on the ground. The assault only stops when Chatterbox suggests using Marian as a host body for the original queen. However, before they can procure Marian, a powerful Nikke appears and uses her sword to carve into them. The one rescuing Marian happens to be Rose, Scarlet's sister, who's somehow back from the dead. Oh shit. At the same time, the queen's call reaches Nihilister, who realizes she won't be able to control herself much longer. She demands Nayuta kill her and claim Lilith's body, but the indecisive monk hesitates. In this short time, she's developed sympathy for the fire dragon. This lapse in judgment allows a flying rapture, Stormbringer, to swoop in and abduct Nihilister, and by extension Lilith inside her. Nayuta has failed, but while returning to Eden empty-handed, she's stopped by someone. Huh? Red Shoes? Didn't she die back during Old Tales? As it turns out, yes, that crazy bitch did perish, but not before making a copy of her personality data and projecting it without a corporeal form. This hologram of sorts is called Mirror, and has somehow resurrected Rose to be her guardian. It seems, to some degree, that Nayuta and Mirror already know each other. I guess it's not too surprising when you think about it. Red Shoes was a member of the VTC, and Deep was a more secretive branch of the VTC. At the very least, they're familiar with each other, enough that Nayuta isn't shocked to see Red Shoes alive in the form of Mirror. As such, Mirror entrusts Marian to the monk, asking her to keep this new queen safe until the coronation. This might sound like a good thing, but Mirror is just as much a villain now than in her previous life. She's just learned from her past mistakes, and now tries to keep a low profile. Furthermore, she's still on the Rapture's side in this conflict. If anything, she merely disapproves of the existing queen. As she puts it, the old queen is a coward who still fears Cinderella. The queen could have torn apart the bubble veil and descended much sooner, but is instead hesitating. Thus, Mirror wants a new queen to take over, one whom she can control like a puppet. To that end, Mirror made Marian into a queen candidate, and wants her to overthrow the old guard. Mind you, Liberalio earned the title Gene Reaper for going around and terminating anyone the Queen Gene manifested in. She's done this time and again, so why is Marian an exception? According to Mirror, the Queen Gene has evolved over the years to be undetectable. Overwhelmed by all this, Nayuta agrees to take Marian back to Eden, insisting on keeping Marian's queen status a secret. There's no telling how Johann and the others will react learning about Marian's candidacy. In Eden's depths, Rapunzel jumpstarts Marian's core, which should allow her nanomachines to take care of the rest. Eden's spear still needs 2 hours before it can fire, but the queen above starts charging up another beam more quickly. Rapunzel and Noah take their positions, planning to shield Eden even if it kills them. Miraculously, they're able to hold off the assault, but not for much longer. As Rapunzel runs out of steam, Noah steps forward, taking the brunt of the attack. Proclaiming herself the surface's greatest shield, she pushes her core to its limit, while most of her body is charred to a crisp. Her noble sacrifice saves Eden, but her brain sustains critical damage and needs to be sealed in a brain shelter. Hopefully, she can still be revived with a new body, but there's no guarantee. Johann wants to pat Noah's head in praise, but there's no way to do so. He vows to get revenge, no matter what it takes. Chatterbox and Indivilia, still recovering from the wounds Rose gave them, meet up with Nihilister. Despite their failure, they mock how Nihilister revived them back at the Ark. Indivilia admits they all serve the same queen, but that doesn't make them friends. The only thing that matters is they work together to destroy Eden. Nihilister can't resist the queen's influence, especially not while her body is still barely functional. Back inside Eden, Marian wakes up and worries about whether she should reveal herself as a queen candidate. At the very least, Nayuta is on her side, looking forward to the day she stands up to the queen and asserts herself. The heretics lead another swarm of raptures to attack Eden, pushing the pilgrims to their breaking point. As the spear finishes charging, Johann is forced to choose whether to aim at the heretics or the queen. His mind is set on finishing things, but at what cost? Before he can make that harsh decision, from the distance, a cloud of dust crawls across the plains. Fortunately, it's not from another rapture horde, as from the dust emerges Crown and her allies. They haven't come alone either. Behind them is an army of 2,000 Nayuta clones. Nayuta's power comes from creating replicas that share her nymph. There are over 3,000 of them in total, most of which act independently to gather intel on the queen. This particular force, however, consists of her combat-ready clones. They may not be the strongest individually, but their numbers more than make up for it. Nayuta looked like she was meditating while the others fought, but she was actually summoning this army to turn the tides. Indivilia, Chatterbox, and Nihilister flee on board a Stormbringer, but this moment of triumph only lasts so long. The queen prepares a third bombardment and is at least 10 seconds ahead of Eden's spear. Rapunzel rises to the occasion, planning to sacrifice herself to buy Johann time. Marian, however, isn't about to let that happen. Instead, she ascends to the surface and absorbs the queen's entire blast. Alongside Eden's counterattack, Marian expends all that stored energy, doubling up on the damage. Utterly astounded, Cecil can only think to call this the Marian Cannon. Both beams strike the queen, forcing her to fall closer to the earth. Only at this point does Marian reveal her true status as another queen, asking everyone to fight alongside her. This development bothers Mirror. Like a conniving bitch, she was hoping Marian would have kept her secret longer. Over time, Mirror would sow distrust between Marian and her friends, only to then swoop in as a supportive ally. Rose points out how cruel this scheme is, and wonders if Eden will actually side with Marian. On that front, Nayuta explains how this all came about, and Marian apologizes for keeping it a secret. Her fellow pilgrims are neither surprised nor bothered. The important bit is what Marian intends to do as queen. Will she just become the next obstacle for humanity? Marian insists that won't happen, and even requests Pioneer kill her if she even tries turning on mankind. As for the kingdom, they've long since accepted her as family. Chime gets Talos's help reaching Marian's height and whacks her in the head, proclaiming how worried they've been about her since she ran off alone. If Mirror has any hope of sabotaging Marian's relationships, it will have to come directly from Eden's own members. Johann, however, remains focused on the invading queen. He confirms the kingdom's aid and consults Cecil regarding strategy. The queen is now about 10 kilometers above them, making it possible for Isabel to attack from the sky. Perhaps out of fear, the queen still isn't coming any closer, allowing Eden to begin repairs. As far as Johann's concerned, Marian is a threat, but not an immediate one. He's in no position to turn away help in this dire situation. If anything, had Marian arrived sooner, Noah may not have had to die. In the grand scheme of things, Johann asks Nayuta if she believes in Marian's ideal world, where everyone gets along. Despite wanting to support Marian, Nayuta doesn't actually believe in such a world. Ironically, such pessimism bothers Johann. From afar, Mirror suspects that Nayuta may have ulterior motives in all of this. Perhaps she's not just supporting Marian to take down the current queen. Wickedly, Mirror assumes Nayuta may also want to take advantage of Marian's ascension. That said, Mirror is fairly confident that Nayuta seeks the destruction of all raptures, as opposed to herself, who wishes to control them. To that end, Mirror still considers Nayuta an ally, though they have different goals. To fight at her strongest, Crown would like to implement the Naked King she used during the Lost Kingdom event. However, it can only be activated in the presence of alpha particles, and there aren't enough at her disposal. At best, they could concentrate what few particles they have into a single burst, so Chime considers that an emergency measure. Papillon stares down at Nayuta's clone army, concerned about the fact that a good 820 of those clones died in the previous assault. Each one lives its own experience, and over time, that causes them to all have slightly different perspectives and attitudes. It can be overwhelming seeing so many Nayutas banter with each other. Papillon hopes that Eden can re-establish long-range communications, but the Queen is still currently jamming them. Given she's not much of a warrior, Papillon is left handling logistical support for the other Nikkes. The Queen continues to bombard Eden from above, but luckily hasn't fired off any more high-energy beams, not since Marian launched one back. During this period, Eden has sent Isabel on recon flights, one of which results in her crashing down from the sky, losing some of her feathers. Apparently, Isabel noticed that the Queen was connected to some heavy cables hiding above the cloud line. Soaring higher, she confirmed that these cables connected to what remains of the space station. No longer serving as a forge for birthing new raptures, the station has now been converted into a secondary armed fortress. Its weapons shot her down, and even though it seems to have been struck by Eden's spear, it remains armed enough to prevent anyone from approaching it. In other words, the Queen remains protected in the air and can safely regain her strength while preparing for a guaranteed assault. She has the luxury of wearing down Eden's forces with lighter attacks from above and the constant waves of raptures gathering below. The only offense Eden can rely on is their spear, but they probably won't last the 3 hours it'll take to charge again. Thus, after some fierce debate, Johann makes his call to have everyone abandon Eden and turn it into a sacrificial bomb. By overloading the power grid, he believes Eden can wipe out everything within 10 kilometers. As dire as it sounds, he admits that defeating the Queen may be a task for the commander and the Ark to take over. The best they can do is cause as much damage as possible before retreating. The members of Inherit are set to act as bait, luring the Queen's forces toward Eden before it detonates. However, Nayuta's got her own plan. After all, her clones are still on the front lines, protecting Eden's perimeter. The loss of her clones is a depressing process, as her host body cannot accommodate the memories and experiences each of her spawn accumulate. As that golden dust gathers around her, Nayuta must sift through these memories and prioritize only the most important ones. In meditation, she glimpses into each of her fallen clones' lives. One looked after a herd of deer, protecting a frail fawn. Said clone wished to go back to that herd to see the fawn all grown up, but was struck down by raptures instead. Experiences like this simply can't be preserved. Unless it pertains to the Queen, Nayuta has no choice but to relinquish these memories. Her tears fall as she acknowledges each unique life, while simultaneously erasing it. At this point, she plans to sacrifice the remainder of her clones to distract the Queen, giving the others a chance to strike at the Queen's artillery fortress. Johann didn't want to consider this option, but Nayuta kept downplaying the importance of her clones, choosing to bear the burden of their deaths in private. This way, Eden won't have to explode, and the fight can still go on. Despite this sacrifice, only 2 Nikkes can actually carry out an assault on the fortress since it's so high up. There's Isabel and whomever she can carry. Snow White insists on going, but is turned down because her loadout is too hefty. Instead, Isabel and Harran, the remaining members of Inherit, set out on their final mission. They know it's suicidal, but would rather risk their lives to give the original Goddesses of Victory a chance to slay the Queen proper. Harran called them insane for being able to fight for the Ark after it abandoned them. Her own feelings make that impossible, so she entrusts the future to those more insane than her. Isabel, on the other hand, promised to share a drink with Scarlet, should they survive. Before departing, Isabel told Papillon to escape the Ark. Even as a prisoner, Papillon stood her ground in this conflict, and Eden now trusts her to keep its secrets. Simply approaching the fortress proves difficult. A swarm of beams whittle down Isabel's torso, throwing off her sense of balance. Another beam melts her lower half, which sends her core's reserve power plummeting. With one last burst of speed, Isabel gives her all to ensure Harran reaches the fortress intact. Thus, the witch Nikke cleaves through the fortress wall without looking back. As she's devoured by the energy blasts, Isabel wishes she could see the commander, her darling, one last time. The poor woman is completely vaporized. Inside the fortress, Harran uses her scythe to spread poison, a special formula she created just for this occasion. You'd think her attacks, being akin to biological warfare, would only affect organic matter. No, Harran's poisons can erode even machines. This particular strain is predatory, replicating as it feasts on the fortress from within. Sure enough, the fortress crumbles apart, with pieces scattering to the surface below. Down there, Crown and Chime cut through the battlefield on their steed, Trom. The sight of debris signals they ought to retreat, but Indivilia targets them specifically. Salty over their previous encounter, the heretic focuses her tail blade entirely on Chime, forcing Crown to keep defending each slash. Indivilia uses this onslaught as a smokescreen to unleash more alva particles. As intended, the particles slow Crown's movements. Unable to deflect the tail blade, Crown instead lunges toward it, blocking its slash with her own body. Expecting this, Indivilia makes sure her tail cuts through Crown's shoulder and outer gut. By using the alva particles as a sneak attack, Indivilia has prevented Crown from invoking the Naked King. Enduring this hit to their morale, Chime instructs Kilo and Talos to continue their retreat. They will abandon the fight and focus on treating Crown's critical wound. Marian watches all of this from afar. As Nayuta clones drop dead and her beloved family gets tormented by Indivilia, Marian fills with rage. Accompanied by that familiar black light, Marian directs her anger at the original queen above. For the first time since the commander saved her, Marian transforms. Adorned in armor, she ascends to the space station and plans to annihilate it with her particle cannon. Utilizing her own transformation, Indivilia tries to stop Marian with lightning strikes, only to learn that Marian can now teleport by disassembling into particles that reconstruct themselves elsewhere. Unimpeded, Marian's cannon tears through the station, while also melting hordes of raptures on the surface. Seeking revenge, Indivilia wraps herself around Marian's armor and plans to electrocute her. However, like a total badass, Harran leaps from the fortress and stabs her scythe into Indivilia's head. Enduring the heretic's electricity, Harran swarms Indivilia in her poison. To an extent, Harran's body is designed to be resistant to her own attacks, but only to a degree. She doesn't mind decaying to rust if it means she takes Indivilia down with her. Over the radio, she confirms with Johann that she and Isabel completed their mission, and asks him to praise them as goddesses of victory. Honoring their efforts, Johann does just that before Harran's body disintegrates. Being much larger, it takes more time for Indivilia to decompose. As she falls, she looks up to see the fortress gone, the queen slowly descending, and Marian raining hell down upon the raptures. Meanwhile, Chime rides on Trom, transporting Crown's tattered remains. She and Kilo rendezvous with Pioneer Squad, who have reluctantly been waiting for their chance to strike. Nayuta has insisted they bide their time until the queen falls in range. When that happens, it's up to them to deliver the final blow. As such, Nayuta stays with Chime and Kilo, doing her best to heal Crown, while Rapunzel, Scarlet, and Snow White take off for the ultimate showdown. Elsewhere, using a designated route Isabel provided her, Papillon flees the area without encountering a single rapture. She's grateful to them for letting her go. Even though they technically held her prisoner, she laments their passing. The least she can do to repay them is to leave the Queen's domain, set up long-range communications, and let Dorothy know what's been going on. At first, Dorothy seems hesitant to return to Eden, so Papillon screams at her with the Queen's descent, Eden's destruction, and the death of Inherit. Without any further clarity, she disconnects the call, hoping Dorothy will do what's right. Rather than back to the Ark, Papillon then chooses to run back towards Eden. Perhaps she, too, has gone insane. At the same time, Nayuta has finished administering Crown's cure. In due time, the King of White Knight Squad should pull through long enough to reunite at Eden, which has more tools available. Nayuta plans to carry Crown there, but then Johan shows up, insisting he'll take over. Now that Inherit is gone, he has no one left to command. In contrast, it's Nayuta's turn to fight alongside her own squad. To an extent, Nayuta's been afraid to take action, worried that she'll only make things worse. However, now is not the time for such doubts. Both Johan and Crown remind her that if you don't try, nothing will change. Before sending her back, Johan gives Nayuta their one remaining Vaphaus bullet, asking her to make it count. After quelling the forces on ground, Marian sets her sights on the Queen. Despite losing her fortress, despite all the defeated Raptures, the Queen doesn't look concerned in the slightest. Instead, she stares directly at Marian, opens her mouth, and fires off a thin red beam. It may be small, but it's powerful enough to rip right through Marian's armor. In a final desperate attack, Marian counters with her own blast, only for the Queen to absorb it just like she did. Tasting her own medicine, Marian's transformation is utterly demolished. She plummets from the wreckage and is caught by Chatterbox. He's come to rescue her, but not for her own sake. He still wants to keep Marian alive so that the Queen can use her as a vessel. To that end, he snaps her limbs so she can't resist. The tremendous pain knocks her unconscious, and Chatterbox only stops mangling her when Mirror asks him to stop. Apparently, Chatterbox is following Mirror's advice. She claims to be speaking on the Queen's behalf, and naively, he trusts her because he can't actually hear the Queen himself. He's not a heretic, so he's never heard the Queen's voice directly. Taking advantage of that, it seems Mirror's been manipulating him like this for a long time now. Afraid that disobeying Mirror will incur the Queen's wrath, Chatterbox agrees to keep Marian safe. She also wants him to procure some Vaphaus, but won't tell him why. As she puts it to herself, the Queen is assimilated with Lilith's head. In turn, the Queen must now contend with Lilith's nymph. Vaphaus would allow Mirror to eliminate that threat, small as it may be. Mirror vanishes when Scarlet, Rapunzel, and Snow White show up. They see Marian's injured body and immediately stand to fight. Meeting their hostility, Chatterbox grows 2 dragon heads from his arms. He used this same sort of attack on White Knight during the Last Kingdom event. He still got these heads from the time he devoured part of Nihilister. Quite frankly though, even with this upgrade, he's a total pushover. Scarlet quickly slices off the dragon heads. Rapunzel's light slices Chatterbox's neck, and Snow rips his head off with the stock of her rifle. She then pumps him full of lead and stomps his head into mush. Pioneer wants to save Marian, but they've got no time, as the Queen has finally descended to their level. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. Like a total tease, the story then shifts to Nayuta, Chime, and Kilo, who worry that Indivilia is still alive. As they approach, they see Nihilister standing over Indivilia, mocking her for failing. Even in her weakened state, the fire dragon isn't afraid of taunting her fellow heretic. By this point, Chime is super pissed. She has a score to settle for hurting her king and slicing off her own head in the past. Anticipating Indivilia's obsession with necks, Chime leaps forward, twisting her body so that the heretic's tail strikes her back instead. Rather than evade any attacks, Chime herself activates the Naked King, revealing her own stunning beauty adorned only by a white robe. Slamming her fist into the ground, Chime hits Indivilia with a shockwave. This gives Kilo the chance to toss Indivilia into the air, where Nayuta awaits, smashing the heretic back into the ground in an epic display. The Naked King has left Chime totally paralyzed from just a brief use, which makes her appreciate how Crown can use it for prolonged periods. Despite such a tremendous force, Indivilia still isn't dead. She begs Nihilister to fight on her behalf. It sucks, but Nihilister doesn't really have the option to refuse, not while the Queen carries influence. Even so, through sheer force of will, she makes a compromise of sorts, biting into her colleague's neck and getting revenge for the time she was devoured. Nayuta has Kilo take Chime to safety, if only to avoid seeing this bloody carnage firsthand. Gulp after heaving gulp, the fire dragon eats her fill, regaining her strength. Supposedly, the Queen forbade the heretics from fighting each other, but Nihilister is determined to disobey. Thus, rather than attack Nayuta, she wants to continue her vendetta against the Queen. From Nayuta's perspective, however, it seems that effort has turned grim. The remainder of her clones have all been wiped out by the Queen, leaving only the 3 pilgrims on the battlefield. Between her constant regeneration and firepower, the Queen prolongs their bout, whereas the Nikkes can only give it their all for so long. This prompts them to implement a special strategy they've saved for this very moment. Snow and Scarlet provide cover as Rapunzel takes point. Her goal isn't to dish out damage, but to instead defend her allies. You see, the members of Pioneer weren't naively searching the surface for the Queen. They figured out some time ago that their target was up in space. Rather than blindly searching then, they've been preparing. With Nayuta's aid in gathering intel, these pilgrims went on to construct a whopping 6,000 missile platforms, all of which have now fired on the Queen's location. As expected, the Queen tries to intercept, but not even she can stop them all. Rapunzel shields her squad from the blast. By the time the flames disperse, only the Queen's skeleton remains. Even so, the bitch is still trying to regenerate. Confident that this regeneration can't last forever, Snow White rallies them to continue their assault. Before that happens, though, Nihilister comes roaring through the clouds. In a bit of a risky gamble, Nayuta has entrusted Nihilister with delivering the Queen's poisoned chalice, or rather, becoming that poisoned chalice. With Lilith's body still inside her, the fire dragon bites down on Eden's Vaphaus bullet and collides with the Queen, who welcomes her with open arms. Before long, the Queen's body begins to contort, with black ooze seeping from her cracks. Nayuta arrives just in time to tell her squad that this is their one shot at victory. The Queen's regeneration is stopped. Simultaneously, Eden's spear has been charging for exactly 3 hours, so Cecil tells everyone to stand back as a concentrated blast is fired at the Queen. Even after this bath in blue light, the bitch still lingers, prompting Pioneer to finish her off. Finally choosing to put herself at risk as the main body, Nayuta concentrates on expanding her mind, gathering all of her clones into one sacrificial flame. The result is like an ascension to godhood. The divinely enlightened Nayuta opens her eyes as her clothes burn away, because of course. This form allows Nayuta to extend a massive crystalline palm against her foe, paving the way for her 3 allies to unite in a final attack. Rapunzel's beams stun the Queen, while Snow White's 7 dwarves blasts a hole through her torso. When the Queen tries to retaliate, Scarlet beheads her swiftly. For a moment, they bask in triumph, having actually defeated their greatest opponent. All seems well, until black blood pours from the Queen's neck, gathering into a large glob. It falls away to reveal a person standing amidst the chaos. Rapunzel is close enough to notice that it's their leader, Lilyweiss. Naively, Rapunzel thinks Lilith has been resurrected and runs to embrace her. Rather than a happy reunion, though, this Lilith swings her arm and blasts Rapunzel into pieces on the ground. Clearly, this isn't the Lilith they knew and loved. Enraged, Scarlet tries to avenge Rapunzel, only to be crushed hard into the ground with enough force to collapse the pavement. She's struck by a punch strong enough to level buildings. From atop one, Snow White aims her rifle, only for another swipe of the arm to cut through the wind itself, severing Snow's head clean from her body. Nayuta too tries to fight back, only to pass out in the face of this foe in Lilith's skin. This monstrosity then approaches Marian's body and proceeds to rip out her core. In the silence, one Nikke appears to continue the battle. Papillon shoots in futility at Lilith's head, freaking out as the imposter draws ever closer. Before Papillon meets the pilgrim's fate, she's saved when Dorothy lands between the two of them. The sight of Lilith's face tugs at Dorothy's heart, but she knows the real Lilyweiss is dead. Instead, the former goddess demands the imposter identify itself. After taking a shot to the head, the imposter looks back between Dorothy and its own blood, ultimately deciding to retreat with an earth-shattering leap. Cecil and Johann appear in the aftermath and ask the survivors to gather what remains of their fallen comrades. Hopefully, in about 2 days' time, Eden can re-establish its optical camouflage and raptures will stop coming. Kilo and Chime offer to protect the area until then. Crown wonders if this can even be called a victory. Harran and Isabel both died. There's nothing left of them to try and revive. Poor Noah's brain is secure, and if we're being optimistic, parts of Pioneer can also be recovered. Snow White was the least damaged. Thanks to the clean cut, both her head and body are left intact. Among Rapunzel's pieces, they're able to secure her brain. Scarlet's brain may still be alive, but she's too damaged to attempt an extraction. Then, without a core, Marian is left in a comatose state, and her auto-repair functions may not hold out. Hearing these results, Dorothy tries to speak with Johann, but he can't even tolerate her right now. He storms off to cool down. Cecil reattaches Snow White's head in the infirmary. Somehow, this whole messy experience has caused Snow to regain the memories she lost over the course of many mind switches. She now remembers Lilith and even Red Hood. If it's true that the Queen is now using Lilith's body, then Snow White knows she isn't strong enough to win. Thus, she asks Cecil to make her new weapons, even though she has no means to pay for them. In a twist of fate, Cecil admits that Eden has always been preparing to upgrade Pioneer. Johann always hoped that Eden and Pioneer would one day team up. Unfortunately, this sentiment only resulted in plans, and prototypes have yet to be built. Still, Cecil estimates it will only take 2 weeks for said weapons to be developed. In the meantime, Snow White closes her eyes and basks in her newly regained memories. The sight of Lilyweiss in her white dress, her admiration for Red Hood's reckless bravery, they now spur her to action, even as her other comrades remain in critical condition. Nayuta suggests that Eden ally themselves with the Ark. Johann and Cecil refuse, while Dorothy remains silent. Their rejection is stubborn given the situation, so Nayuta plans to go to the Ark anyway. She still has aspirations of seeing humanity reclaim the surface, and isn't willing to let pride get in the way of that. The Queen is possessing their beloved goddess, which should take precedent to any past grudges. Dorothy then admits there's a way to harness the Ark's strength without actually allying with them. Now that the Ark has Eden's technology, they're preparing for a third surface reclamation war. Johann and Cecil realize that this was Dorothy's plan all along, to fan the flames and get the Ark to do the fighting for them. Johann finds this even more detestable than an actual alliance. Instead, he proposes they reach out to the commander, the only person they trust to keep all of their interests in mind. Only if the commander and his Nikkes can't win will Eden consider an alliance with the Ark. As for Dorothy, Johann chooses to ban her from both Eden and Inherit. She may have founded Eden, but has since gone on to sabotage it behind everyone's back. In her selfish scheme against the Ark, she lost sight of what Eden was built to accomplish. Having betrayed those she united in paradise, they now demand she leave and never return. To be fair, there isn't much left of Eden, but that sentiment still stings. Having been rejected by Eden, Dorothy is now approached by Snow White, who wants her to join back with her former goddesses. They can still fight against the Queen, so long as she gives up her disgraceful work to sabotage the Ark. Of course, Dorothy still hasn't let go of her hate, and doesn't appreciate her efforts being criticized. Even with their precious Lilyweiss in such a sorry state, she needs more time to process her path going forward. By herself, then, Snow White realizes that the days of old are gone. In secret, Nayuta and Mirror discuss what has transpired. Neither of them anticipated that Vaphaus would only destroy the Queen's original body. How could they expect Lilith's body to serve as the perfect escape from demise? Even so, Mirror isn't all too upset by these developments. Rose, however, is worried about what'll happen to Scarlet. Since her body will require a complete reconstruction, there's a chance her memories may not endure. Upon being interrupted, Mirror severs Rose's metaphorical puppet strings, causing her to collapse on the floor. The two then shift topic to Marian. Eden has installed a pseudo-core that, at best, functions as life support. Will she ever be able to fight? Furthermore, the Queen ripped out her original core, and with it, most of her Queen gene. Nonetheless, Mirror suspects that some of the gene still lingers in Marian's brain, and if they really want to, they can find a way to amplify it. On the other hand, now that the Queen has obtained Lilith's power, she wonders about simply teaming up again. She still hopes Marian can claim the throne, but until then, Mirror plans to act as a double agent, feeding Nayuta any juicy intel she can gather. It'll be a bit tricky, given how Nayuta has burned through most of her clones to transform like she did. Then again, those 2,000 casualties were only her combat clones. Wow, and that concludes the Goddess Fall event. A major showdown with the Queen, only to result in the Queen sticking around in the body of the strongest Nikke. I tend to think of this as a season finale, with the main conflict taking a brand new shape. There's still so much we don't know, but to process some of it, let's see what Dai-chan's got to say.
Hey guys, Dai-chan here. Rather than straight-up spoilers, I feel a lot of what I have to discuss is speculation. Things I could only mention as spoilers before are now free game to anyone watching this series. The biggest thought on my mind is exactly how the Queen was able to survive. We don't have an exact explanation for it. The plan was to sneak in Vaphaus with Lilith's body, which may have been a foolish plan all along. After all, Nihilister knew the Queen wanted a new vessel, and since Vaphaus doesn't really seem to harm Nikkes, or even all heretics for that matter, the obvious solution would be for the Queen to simply abandon her own body in favor of this new one. Heck, it seemed the Queen was going to do that anyway, so poisoning her old body wasn't really necessary. Then again, I'd like to think Nihilister's sacrifice did us some good. Perhaps the Queen was planning on using her old body for as long as possible before making the switch. Vaphaus may have forced her hand sooner than intended. Then we have to consider what Mirror mentioned. Lilith's head, at least before Nihilister's sacrifice, still contained Lilyweise's nymph. In that regard, I bet the Queen's actually glad to be rid of that. Still, I have to wonder if Lilyweise's consciousness remains in some capacity. If this were an ordinary Nikke, their brain would probably die not long after their body. After all, there's only a short period of time when a Nikke's head can be salvaged for revival. Lilywise passed on long before Liberalia stole her head, so I wouldn't have expected her brain to still be functioning. Perhaps a Nikke's nymph can stick around even after the brain itself starts to decay. In that case, there should now be no way for Lilywise to still be in there. Yet, somehow, I expect the writers to inject some kind of internal struggle between the Queen's will and Lilith's. Only time will tell. Mirror happens to be a strange antagonist. She's both siding with the Raptures, while also plotting against their current Queen. I've mentioned this before, but Mirror clearly plays a big role in the creation of heretics. She admitted to turning Marian into a Queen candidate, and it's also revealed that she created Liberalia using what she learned from Anichiro. The full extent of her involvement remains a mystery. For now, it's fascinating how Nayuta maintains a temporary alliance with her. They both want Marian to survive and become the new Queen, but are betting on different outcomes. Mirror wants Marian to be her pawn, to hold soft power over the Raptures. Nayuta supposedly wants Marian to wipe out the Raptures. Meanwhile, Marian herself just wants everyone to get along. As of right now, though, there's no chance of any of that happening. One might say that all of Chatterbox's mysteries can be summed up as Mirror toying with him. As a mere tyrant, he couldn't hear the Queen's voice, but foolishly believed Mirror was relaying the Queen's wishes vicariously. That incident in the past, where he was supposedly saved by the Queen, was likely more of Mirror's gaslighting. I'd like to assume he's dead, but he's already been resurrected once. If Nihilister weren't absorbed by the queen, I'd expect Indivilia could have revived somehow too. Honestly though, I hope not. A lot of fans seem to be upset that Nikke is officially killing off certain characters, but I find that sort of refreshing. It's not like you can't still use Harran, Isabel, and Red Hood in combat. I'm glad to know Rose is still alive and cares so much about her little sister, even though they aren't reuniting anytime soon. I'd like to know how Mirror either kept her alive or literally brought her back from the dead. Like herself, it's possible that Rose's consciousness is merely a digitized simulation. By this point, we have a bit of a scapegoat for things that can't be explained. That is, the existence of Deep implies that there's technology that nobody else has access to. Anyone who breaks the world's rules could simply be the product of deep research. Nayuta is still very much one of these cases. Just like Rapi and Red Hood fusing together, Nayuta is able to fuse with her various clones. I wonder if she can just make more of them now that she's lost so many. We haven't really gotten an explanation into her divine form, which only activates when she burns through her clones' lives and memories. Verily, she remains quite the mystery. I also wonder where she developed that unique way of speaking. Is it like Scarlet, who's spoken like that ever since becoming a Nikke? The last thing on my itinerary pertains to the previous video. We know almost nothing about Pinocchio, as she was introduced to Top Whaley, but never mentioned in the chapters since. She's apparently the only Nikke whose body grows like a human's. I suppose it's not quite like a human, as the process is really painful, but it's still quite unique. I assume the writers have some larger plan for her, but as it stands, I wouldn't blame you for forgetting she ever existed. Also, to clarify, I suppose Pinocchio wasn't discovered on the surface as I said before. Rather, she was found inside Whaley's stomach. I assumed that meant Whaley gobbled her up from the surface, but I suppose it's also possible she was somehow born within Whaley, further adding to her self-identifying as a rapture. The very concept of a Nikke being born is highly suspicious. She may very well be the best example of Nikke rapture cohabitation. The point still stands, though. We need more details. Part of the excitement of Nikke's story is slowly seeing all of these mysteries gain clarity in dramatic fashion. Each new chapter of the story has me on the edge of my seat, and I hope you're all eagerly awaiting the next part in this series. Don't forget to check out the full playlist for any episodes you may have missed. Maybe now is a great time for you to look back on the spoiler sections of older videos, as we've now finally reached most of what I talk about in them. In any case, please stay in the loop. Until next time, celebrate your fandom!
I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters. Video Gamer 75, Dante Pendragon, Time Travel Master, Stephen Elak, Mystic Samurai 1983, Otaku Mom, Free Brick, Jugemu Unko, Lunar Works, Link Pendrago, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Crow Calum, Gatsby 1922, Matal Mataru, Winter's Edge, Fanathiel, Foxbox, Draco Chaotic, Caitlin P, Sith Lord 906, Vladimirovna, The Taz 96, Kengo X77, Alistair Bernadotte, and Liamon 3. Thank you all so much.